All right, welcome back for some more sociology. In this video, we're going to start looking at social class. And um, we're going to look at the United States, and then we're going to look at states compared to one another, and then look at Kentucky, and then we're going to get specific to the location of of Owensboro Davis County. Um, all right, let's take a look at it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides. And what I have done is I've using some graphics that I've had over a period of time. And you can see this says 2005, but I'm going to show you some most recent information from the textbook that I use. Um, but I'm showing you 2005 to show you that this is something that you can look at as an individual year, but it's also something you need to look at over time, looking at it longitudinally, looking at it over a period of time. Because this is something income inequality, wealth inequality, it doesn't just happen in one year. But you have to look at it in a year to have a better understanding of the subtleties, the details of it. But it's something that has been around for a long period of time. Okay. So looking at this first chart, just as an illustration here, these pie charts, these two pie charts, you're looking at income in one. Let me turn on my laser pointer. I love my laser pointer. You have income in one, wealth in another. These look two different pie charts. Excuse me. You have it broken out by quintiles, so 20%, right? Now, if this was equality, then all of the pieces of the pie would be equal, right? Just like a pizza you get from a pizza shop or a pizza restaurant. Okay. But this is what inequality looks like. And you can see there's lots of different ways of looking at this. The richest 20% versus down to the poorest 20%. This data comes from the Census Bureau. We get a lot of different data from the Census Bureau, not just the Census Survey. They do all kinds of research annually, not just every 10 years. Um, so, I tell my students inequality is not something to be debated, it exists. I mean, the data is clear on that. Now, understanding what this means and putting it in context is a different thing. So, I want to highlight a few things just to kind of get you to thinking about this. And you can see that there's a very big gap between the richest 20% and everybody else. You can see that displayed here. There's something over here I want to draw your attention to. Now, wealth is different than income. Before we look at this in more detail, wealth is different than income. Income is a part of wealth, but wealth includes income, property, savings, anything of value, cars, investments, real estate. All of that would be considered part of wealth. So that's why this is different than this. This takes a lot more into account. But you can think the more money you have, the more you're able to invest that into additional earnings or additional value. Now, what does this -1 represent? This is an interesting phenomenon. -1. So negative wealth. So what is negative wealth? That's debt. And so 20% of families in the United States in 2005 were in debt. Okay. You move on up the ladder here. 1 minus 1 is 0. That's 40% of families in 2005 in the United States had no wealth. So they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're almost in debt. They probably have a little bit of debt here and there, right? So now what's interesting, we're going to move forward. I'm going to show you several different years of pie charts. This is 2005. And keep your eyes on, for example, this number here on both of these. So as we go through years, it's 2005. This is 2006. This is 2009, 2008, and 2009. You can see it doesn't change very much. Year to year, this is one of those things that doesn't change very much. 2011. As a matter of fact, when you see these numbers, the richer are getting richer, right? And this is the most recent data I'm going to have in this particular video. And so now this is higher. These are much higher than what you just seen. Okay. Now looking at this data a different way, we're going to put it on this chart here. I'm going to put a link to this in. These notes are available in Blackboard. They're also going to be in the comments of this video on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. But look at this over time. So now this is adjusted for inflation, okay? And so you hear that the rich get rich, the poor get poor. That's accurate to some degree. The rich get much, much richer, and the poor remain a little bit, pretty much about the same. So when you look at the changes over time, now this is, look, a 40-year time period, okay? You can see this has been around for quite some time, these gaps, this inequality. Now, again, you may think it's okay, and that's fine, but inequality is inequality. These are not equal. Now, how do you get rich, and why are people poor? That's a whole different animal that we could get into, but not for the purpose of this video, not going to get into that, okay? Just looking at the data around stratification and inequality as it is relates to social class. So you can see here over time, there's a 21% increase for the poorest 20%. All right, adjusted for inflation. So it's apples to apples, comparing apples to apples. But up here, that's a 112% increase. So the rich get much richer. The poor do a little bit better over time. And you can see that on up the ladder there. Okay? So let's go on and look at this a couple of different ways. This is a chart that I created based upon the data that's in the textbook. All right? And so it's not just rich people, poor people. There are gradations, and I've mentioned this. There's different levels of that hierarchy. And there's variation in there. But what's interesting to note, as you look at this, you could look at this chart and look at the square quadrants in here and look at it as it relates to the other. And you could say, yeah, that makes sense. And that's what you got to be careful of. That inequality is so predictable that it makes sense. And we've learned this over time. So we have learned that to be upper, it means this right here. It means in terms of education, occupation, and income, that's what it means. And again, stratification involves beliefs about what is okay and what's not okay. And it's something that happens over time. So this is so predictable that I could take one square, professional managers, I could take that, and I can make predictions about everything else around it based on that and be pretty accurate. Because what we know in the United States, social class, income, and wealth is based on three major things. Now, there's other things that are at play here, but three major things: your family background, where you come from, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, your job, and the amount of education you have. Those are all related. Now, the family part in this chart you're going to see here is this. That's the clearest example of this. Okay, I'm going to have another video that looks at intra and intergenerational social mobility. And you'll see that video a little bit later on. So we know that based on education here, this is the kinds of jobs that you're likely to have, the amount of money you're likely to make. And then you start looking again at percent of population. And again, if these were equal, then these would all be equal numbers for each category. And of course, they're not. Now, a majority of people are upper, middle, and lower. A majority of people are in this upper, middle, and average middle class. All right. Now, the poorest of the poor obviously are down here. The richest of the rich are up here. Okay. All right, moving on. Now, again, you could click these. These are additional data pieces related to what we're covering You can click this if you have the notes open, whether, again, in the comments or they're posted in Blackboard in this folder. The next thing I'm going to do is look at this by state, all right? And I've done the same thing here. This is 2006. You're looking at median household income, the average household income by state, and I'm putting the United States, the states compared to the United States in here. So there's the United States. This is from 2006. And these are the states with the highest household income. And these are the states with the lowest. Of course, you can see Kentucky there. Now, this is something, again, over time, it stays the same, right? Something to note, where are these located? Of course, Hawaii is way out there compared to these other places, but these are the Northeast and the Eastern Seaboard. And look at these are in the South, okay? So we don't have states that have high income surrounded by states that are really, really poor. So there's regional phenomena at play here too. You think about the history of the United States, what parts of the United States are poor, what parts of the United States are wealthier. Now, things change in a democratic society where people are very mobile. Culture changes and some things change, but by and large, this stuff remains pretty much the same over time. Okay? Watch Kentucky here, the state and income as we go from 2006 to 2007. You know, it's important, or not important, but it's interesting to note here that Kentucky's ranked 48 compared to the year before. Kentucky was ranked 45th, but the number here, the median household income, actually increased here, but the ranking got lower. Now, how do you explain that? Well, other states are changing too. You know, people are developing all around the country, not just one community, one state. Okay, everybody's changing and doing things differently. 2008, much the same. You got the same states up here, same states down here. Again, we went from 2006 to 2000. I think this is 2010 or 11. And you can still see the same states at the top, same states at the bottom. 2013. This is 2019. And then this is 2022. I think that's the last one I have for this. So here I include, like top 20 versus bottom 20, something like that. Kentucky's down here at 47. And look at the number here compared to where it was in 2006. It was at 39,000. So it's increased by 20,000, but cost of living has increased. Again, these are all based on the same comparisons, apple to apple. Earlier this was, I think, 65,000. Now it's 90. That's average. Well, not average, it's median household income. Median is not average, but it's very similar to average, right? Man, that's really high. So how do you explain this away? Well, some people will say cost of living is higher in some places. To some degree, yes, but not for everything. Car insurance might be a little bit more. Property is more expensive in richer places than poorer places. Yeah. But, gas is comparable. Food is comparable. Student loan payments are comparable. Electricity is comparable. So you can't just say it's because of cost of living, right? And what that equates to is that people in these lower states they don't make as much money. They're not able to pay for things the way that they can in richer places. Not only that, but in richer places, they're going to have more stuff. And their lifestyle is going to be different. They're going to be doing different things. They're going to be able to afford $1,000 tickets to go see a professional sporting event. Or not 1,000, but maybe 100 or 200. Okay? As an example. Now, we can localize this as well. But before we do, I'll point out a couple of things here. This is the most recent one that's in your textbook, but it's really difficult to interpret because of the variation in color. This is a little bit older, but it's still it still has stayed the same. But it enables me to kind of show you something here. So the areas in purple, the darker color, are the areas that are in higher poverty. So poverty is different than median income, right? Poverty is generally how much it costs to pay for basic needs. And that poverty measure, if you fall below that measure, you're considered in poverty. Whereas median household income is like the average amount of money that homes make or people make living in a household compared to other households. Now, you would think that if you live in a place where median household income is towards the bottom, like Kentucky, you would think then that people are more likely to be in poverty. And that's what this is illustrating. But remember, just because you live in a state that has lower median household income, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have higher rates of poverty. And again, it can vary within state as well. Of course, in Kentucky, it's very common for people to say Eastern Kentucky is the same as Western Kentucky, but if you live in Kentucky, you know that they're not the same. They're very different. Just like you could say that in South Dakota or North Dakota. So let's look just for a second about the concentrations of poverty you see in various places. Why is it just median household income? Well, median household income is only one indicator of income and wealth. Okay. Education is part of that. Occupation is part of that. Family background. And also race and ethnicity. So, for example, we know here that there's a larger proportion of African American population. And African Americans are disproportionately likely to be poor compared to other groups. Out here, it's Latin Americans, Mexican Americans in particular, Hispanics. Okay, same thing here. This is Native American populations. Okay, although race and ethnicity is not the only indicator about income status or poverty, because in Kentucky, these are white people in Eastern Kentucky. So these things are all related. Some have better predictability or prediction quality. Some are outliers but related to that phenomenon. And race and ethnicity is one of those things that's related to income status and wealth. You think about the history of African American populations, the history of Native American populations in the United States, the history of Hispanic American populations in the United States, and that's going to be related to social status and social standing. The last thing I want to look at is this is going to be specific to Owensboro Davis County in the state of Kentucky. You're going to look at this one right here. I've done the same thing where I provide several years of data to illustrate it's something that happens over time. But what we have here is we're looking at median household income, poverty level, and then there's that educational piece. It's a very common measure to look at related to income and wealth, educational attainment. And keep in mind that this is looking at bachelor's degree, those that are 25 and over. So anybody over 25. So, traditionally you get out of high school at 18. We don't start looking at people until 7 years later to see if they have a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree usually is 4 years of college, around there. So we don't start looking at you till you're 25. And so you can see there are some gains here. When you look at this compared to the previous chart, and you're going to have to go do that on your own, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'll show you real quick. Look at these numbers here for poverty and look at education. And then you go back here and you can see that the increase here. It decreased here a little bit. So we have Davis County, the city of Owensboro, Kentucky, in the United States. And you can see the city of Owensboro are more likely to have lower median household income compared to the county. More likely to have poverty, but more likely to have higher levels of educational attainment. It's interesting to note, okay? So I think that's the last slide on here. Yeah, that's the last slide. And we're going to stop right there. And hope you found that interesting. Lots of information in there. Okay. Looking at social class, various dimensions of social class, and then looking at some data pieces from city, state, country. All right. Thank you.